Alyssa, we're back. Another book, another conversation. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, just keep cranking out books to hang out with you, Heather.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, we could have a conversation without the blood, sweat, and tears and fetal position cries. I was actually speaking to someone yesterday who helped me with my last book proposal. And I was like, I think it's coming. And she's like, okay. And then she was just like so blunt and honest. And I was like, bring it. It's like you sign up for an endurance event.
It is a marathon, that is for sure. And still just riding that wave. I mean, even with tiny humans, it's the proposal, it's the offer, it's the writing, the editing, all that jazz, and then publishing and book tour. And I was a billion weeks pregnant when that published, 32 weeks pregnant, I think, when that one published. And then 22 months later, it hit the New York Times bestseller list. And that was because we just kept talking about it. So it's not even like, well, once it's out in the world, you're like, it's like, no, it's still sharing about it. It doesn't end, these book babies.
Yes. So I actually have a list of all the things I wanted to ask you, but I'm like, I want to go a little detour for a second
Great.
and stay on this book topic because obviously there's a deeper why. There's like an ache and an earning and a pull to put this message out in the world. And before we even hit record and had this conversation, you were talking about the time and energy you're away from your family during launching because you're on planes and you're putting this message out into the world. So I'm just curious if you would talk a little bit about that, because I see so many people who it's this duality of I want to be present or be at home with my family, and then yet I have this big message inside of me that like won't leave me alone and I want to make an impact in the world. So can you just like talk a little bit
Yeah.
honestly about that process for you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I have two tiny humans, and on a given day, I vacillate between I want to quit my job and hide away and just hang out with them and do nothing else. And then pull into, gosh, this work is too important. And I'm not doing this to them, I'm doing it for them, that they might get to live in a more emotionally intelligent world. And I asked my 4-year-old right at the beginning of book tour, I was telling him, like, I'm going to go on this trip and we have, a calendar, you can see where I am and all that jazz. And I asked him, I said, Buddy, what do I do for my work? When I'm traveling for work, what do I do? And he said, Mama, you teach people what to do when they're feeling mad or frustrated so they don't hurt themselves or somebody else, even on accident.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, that's right. And it was one of those moments for me where I was like, I'm doing the right thing. My brain and my body are in the right spaces right now.
Mhm.
I'm not doing this to them. I'm not doing something to them. I'm doing it for them. I'm working to create a world in which their peers, their bosses, their partners, themselves have tools for navigating hard things and emotions and all that comes with being a human on planet Earth. And that feels too big to stay quiet about.
It's funny because I wrote down that I wanted to talk to you about raising emotionally resilient humans,
Mhm.
right? That's really what we're talking about. And that's like real time what you're
Mhm.
doing. And my brain is going to, okay, obviously there was a lot of preparation and support that you had to surround yourself with to get to the launch. And then I'm assuming there's going to be a recovery period. This is not a, you know, yearly, daily sprint that you're doing, it's a moment in time.
Yeah, it's a season.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's right. Yeah. So basically, it carved out for myself the leading up to. So the book published on September 16th. Starting early August, things started to ramp up, right? A lot of podcast interviews and things like that started. And then once pub hits, I'm on the road for about 6 weeks, on and off, coming back, touching base. And that's a lot of media and interviews and book events and things like that. And then things die down a bit. And then just regular travel, because I travel for work anyway, where I present at a lot of conferences. I do a lot of speaking engagements for private organizations and schools and things. And that's still happening too. So then towards the end of October, I've got like a conference. I've got the biggest early childhood conference in the world, happens in November. I'm presenting at that. And so there's things where it's like, okay, then we just get back to kind of my normal travel for the fall, where it's not every week I'm leaving, but instead I'm leaving some weeks for a couple days.
Mhm.
And then I just like go inward for the month of December, and I hide from the world and just hunker down with my family and into January as well. And then I start to emerge again, usually in February, March, April, where things start to pick up again for speaking stuff. But I have these kind of hibernation seasons. Um, December and January are big months where I'm just with my family, and June and July are big months where I'm just with my family. And yeah, sometimes work wise it's a sprint and sometimes it's more casual.
Okay, I really appreciate you talking about I'm assuming you had to observe your patterns and
Mhm.
rhythms and had to learn a lot about this in the process. Now, I want to talk to you about the pull for the
Mm.
message and the mission. We can label it as quote unquote work, but I want to talk about the spiritual pull under that. And so maybe it's a little bit about your story, maybe, but I just want to go right to that
Yeah.
because I sit with that all the time where I'm like, this won't go away. And I see so many people that just let these messages die within them. And I'm like, that's
Mm.
what the world needs from you. So I'm just curious your perspective and if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the pull has ebbed and flowed for me in different seasons. Like when I'm postpartum, that pull's real quiet. My pull is to hunker down and be with my kids and my family. And every time I've had a kid for the first at least 6 months after having them, I'm like, I think I want to sell seed and quit the business and whatever. Like the pull isn't there. And then it ebbs and flows. And right now we're in a part where that pull is real strong. And I think about these kids. I have the privilege of doing some work in schools and getting to meet kids and hear their stories and see the way the work that we're doing affects them. And I can't go to bed at night knowing the way that it affects them and say, like, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I have this little guy that just came to mind who I wrote about in Big Kids, actually. He's experienced a lot of trauma. He's 5 years old and has was living with one parent. There was domestic abuse. He was removed from that household and placed with a parent he'd never met before. And he has experienced some really intense trauma. Um, really, really brutal things have happened to him. And I got to meet him in kindergarten when he's running through the halls and pulling the fire alarm and ripping things off the walls and living in a fear state. And have the privilege of working with the school that he attends. That's an incredible school that serves a lot of kids with high needs, low income, high poverty. A lot of kids have at least one incarcerated parent at this school, and homelessness. And this school's incredible. They basically said, like, come in and help us do whatever we can do. And I met this kiddo when he was running through the hall, screaming, ripping things off the wall, and the assistant superintendent was following behind him. And so I followed behind them, and he got himself to this place where he was kind of in a corner. He always finds a corner, and he's like on high alert looking around. And I just dropped my body against the wall near him, but not right next to him, and popped my shoulders back, and just in as quiet of a voice as I could say, I said, "Hey, buddy, my name's Alyssa, and I'm not mad at you, and you're not in trouble, and I'm here with you. Take as much time as you need." And we just stayed there, and he was on high alert, like looking around. And after a couple minutes, I said, "Do you know what I've learned about you? Is that your body is so good at keeping you safe. That when you didn't feel safe in your class, you found a spot that feels safe for you. Your body is so good at that, bud." And he started to soften a little bit. And eventually, it was about 5 to 7 total minutes of us being over there before he was talking with me and we were chatting, and then we were holding hands and walking back to the class, and he was able to engage in math groups for his first time since being at school. Where prior to that, anytime any academia came into play, he would bolt. And I look at him, and then 2 months later, I came back to that school, and he wasn't on my list of kids to check in on. And I was like, "What's going on?" And they were like, "We haven't had any behavior support calls for him." All we had done was put a plan in place to support his nervous system, his unique nervous system, how it operates, and a plan for connection so that he could feel safe and supported and seen in the classroom. And his teachers are phenomenal, and they were so open, and the school didn't need a 504 or an IEP in place. They were just like, yeah, whatever tools he needs. And in 2 months' time, they hadn't had another behavior support call for him. And when I close my eyes at night, I think of the hymns that I've had the privilege of meeting and learning about and seeing, and how this work helps them feel safe in a world that has been scary for them.
Can you see the tears in my eyes? I'm like holding it back. And I'll tell you why, because number one, I used to do the exact same thing when I
Mm.
was a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
They used to, they're like, Heather, we got a runner, we got a behavior
Yeah.
kid. And they'd throw me in the room. And I'm like, why is this difficult? Like, why is this hard for people?
Mm.
All you have to do is that human right there. Like, let's stop with, oh, where's the framework? Like, what page do I flip to in this book? What's the
Sure.
protocol? What's the labels? What's the diagnosis? And I'm like, they're terrified. They're scared. Just soften, just sit, be patient, wait, and connect.
Yeah.
That's it. And
Yeah.
I don't know why that, like right there, that it makes me, that's what keeps me up at night, where I'm like, I just want children. I always tell people, I'm like, I am talking to parents, primarily women, so that you can get out of your children's way.
Mm.
And if we can learn to feel safe in our own bodies and our own lives, we can support the people who depend on us. So
It's
yeah,
so hard
curious.
to do. It's so hard to do in a classroom setting. I have so much compassion for these teachers of like, you got 20 kids in your class, and now,
Absolutely.
and you don't know these kids' triggers, right? Like, there are some things where it's like, sure, we can anticipate this as a trigger, that as a trigger. And, or we see the kid who they start throwing things and saying, I feel dumb. And it's when we're doing math and they feel like they're not capable of doing those things, become a little more obvious. But for our kids with such intense trauma, we don't know their triggers. And I look at those teachers with so much gratitude and compassion, because they got this classroom of 20 kids. And then what feels like out of nowhere, all of a sudden a kid is throwing a desk across a room, or a chair, or climbing a file cabinet, or I mean, we had a teacher get a concussion. Like, it's not easy work. It's not casual work, especially when you can't give that one-to-one support all the time.
Right.
And you're worried about these other kids not getting access to the academic learning. I have so much compassion for teachers, and I think what we can do a better job of in supporting them, and this is the work that we do at Seed. In fact, the bulk of our work at Seed is working with schools, and we come in and help folks understand a kid's unique nervous system and put proactive tools in place to support regulation throughout the day. So actually, that same school that I was just talking about, when we started working with them, that's all we did first. We have a regulation questionnaire. We worked with occupational therapists to put it together, and it helps us understand a kid's unique nervous system, what drains them, what recharges them, so that when we come in, we're not like, do belly breaths for all these kids. Like, yeah, this is not going to work for a lot of kids. And so we look at Oh, are they vestibular seeking? Great. This is the type of seat they should be in. Are they vestibular sensitive? They should not be in that seat. Are they proprioceptive seeking? How proprioceptive seeking are they? Is it high? Is it kind of lower, neutral? And that customizes their day a bit in the tools that are in place. And we did that. We came in and did that. And from Q1 to Q2, we saw a 60% reduction in behavior support calls from
Wow.
that school, just from that. No
Wow.
personalized plans in place, just proactive sensory supports for all kids, not just your high flyers, not just the ones demanding your attention, but for all the kids to get their nervous system needs met more proactively throughout the day. And yeah, we dropped those behavior support calls by more than half. That is what I think we need to do a better job supporting teachers with, is how to do a lot of this work proactively so that we're not in these reactive cycles, kind of waiting for this big behavior and then coming back from it.
Okay. So here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, two things is I could imagine the exhaustion
Mm-hmm.
of you as a caregiver, teacher are
Yeah.
constantly being triggered yourself. Like you could have the quote unquote skills and
Mm-hmm.
the awareness of nervous system regulation as a theory. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, we have everything in place, but I just feel like a punching bag, right? Like constant input coming to you. And then you have all these little nervous systems that are being triggered all the time. Such big energy. I do
Yeah.
understand the value of being proactive versus reactive. I had a client who came in as a teacher and she started to get known for conscious quote unquote discipline in her
Mm-hmm.
classroom, which was nervous system regulation and all
Mm-hmm.
of the things. And they're like, what are you doing? Why are people listening to you? I am fascinated why this is a new concept for
Mm.
humanity. So I'm curious your thoughts there
Yeah.
as to why nervous system regulation is, I'm going to say it's trending, but 20 years ago when I had my firstborn, this was not really a thing we
Correct.
talked about. So just curious why this is now a thing. And of course, our children or the children are showing us our lack of skill. So the adults are trying to catch up with all of this.
Well, 100%. We're trying to teach something we didn't grow up learning, right? And that's what I really look at here, is that we're doing something different than how we were raised, in the same way that my parents did some things differently than how they were raised, and some things the same. And a lot of us came to adulthood and said, oh man, we didn't feel seen in childhood, or we didn't learn what to do with our emotions. We just learned we weren't supposed to have certain emotions and express certain emotions. And now we're living with intense rates of anxiety and depression, and people experiencing a feeling and feeling like they're failing for feeling and trying to get out of it. And it's like quicksand and you sink into it. And so a lot of us came to adulthood and said, yeah, I don't want to do that. That
Mhm.
didn't work well for me. And just started consuming. Mass consumption became available with the internet. That prior to that, when I was being raised, apart from maybe checking a book out of the library, or if it was in the Encyclopedia Britannica, like
Yeah.
other than that, it was just being passed from generation. And I grew up in a small town where people largely stay. It's the town my mom grew up in. The same first grade teacher as my Aunt Anne, right? Like it is a place where it's easy to repeat cultural trauma because people don't often leave to be exposed to other cultures and ways of doing things. And the internet broke that open, where all of a sudden we could be exposed to other information, other ways of doing things in a way that didn't exist when you were writing letters and checking books out of the library as your main source of gathering new information. And I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's really great that we can share new information, that we can make the nervous system zeitgeisty. That's so cool to me. And also, I think we've had a pull away from intuition and really looking outside of ourselves for all these answers, instead of pulling back and saying, why do I think my kid's doing that?
Yeah.
We're like, ooh, where's the parenting membership I can pay for to learn why my kid's doing that? And I think that there's a balance of learning and knowledge and guidance and support, and also knowing your kid best. You're the expert on your kid, and being able to get curious about what is coming up and what is happening. We interviewed a bunch of teachers and families and kids for Big Kids. And this one teacher that I interviewed, she's been in the field for decades and she's phenomenal. And I asked her, I was like, what is it that keeps you calm in the chaos? Because it's not like the kids in her classroom are just chill and they're like, oh, yeah, we're just going to come in and be calm. No, there's still chaos that happens. There's still frustration and new skills being built and all that jazz that comes with being a kid in school. But she's calm in their chaos most of the time. And she said, well, first and foremost, I had twins and learned I'm in control of nothing. And she was like, and then I've done this for long enough that I know that a lot of these things don't super matter. And what matters most in me teaching them academics is them feeling safe in our classroom. And that feeling safe in our classroom doesn't always sound calm. It doesn't always look calm. In fact, it's rarely for kids saying, excuse me, I'm having a hard feeling. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And being able to see that them having a hard feeling doesn't mean everything's going to go off the rails. And I was like, this is it. She has figured out that you talked about the punching bag piece, that as that stimuli is all coming in and these kids are all having hard feelings, she's figured out what she needs to regulate her nervous system and what narratives needed to be rewritten to know that, oh yeah, it's actually okay if that kid's losing it. Or if that kid goes under the table during math because they're overwhelmed. I can leave them under the table. They'll come out when they're ready. Or I can check in on them and then they'll come out when they're ready. But she learned that it doesn't really matter if they went under the table. It doesn't really matter if they're yelling or hitting the desk when they're frustrated. What really matters is that they know they can do those things in this classroom and that she's going to keep everybody safe.
Ugh. Yeah, and it's not personal, right? Like you
It's
said,
not.
rewriting these narratives, these stories. Um, I have been like digging into you like hinted about it of like we have access to more information and people are just information overload now. And I'm like, okay, guys, you don't actually need any more information. It's integration. Like
Mm-hmm.
we need to, which is why I called the podcast Emotionally Uncomfortable, because you now need to go in, you need to feel it, you need to go through it, you need to understand it. Some people call it the messy middle, but it's like jump in to the pool. Like you've decided, you're aware, like I want to go swimming. Great. Now you're walking around the pool. Just because you keep walking around the pool and absorbing all that information does not mean you're actually swimming. Like you need to go one,
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, jump. Yeah, that's a phenomenon in itself. Is like, okay, you have what you need. Now go do the work, right? And you have daily opportunities to do the work. So
I don't think people have what they need. I think that's part of the problem. I think we've had really big parenting influencers do things
I love
that
that you said that, by the way. You're like,
are,
no, I don't agree. I don't. So I'm curious. We
yeah,
don't have what we need.
I don't think so, because I think one thing that's been helpful as a first step is we've had these large parenting influencers come in and help people understand that they have a good kid who's having a hard time, not a bad kid. But what I've heard over and over and over, especially on this book tour,
Mm.
is that they don't feel like they know where to go from there. Where they're like, okay, this kid's fine. I understand this kid's not trying to make me mad. They're just having a hard time. And now what? How do I teach them what else to do? How do I
Mhm.
actually respond to them in the moment outside of just rewriting the narratives or my thought patterns? What do I actually do? I think people are stuck on the side of the pool because they don't know, what do I actually do next? And who is this unique child? And I mean, you know this. Anyone who has more than one kid knows it's not one size fits all. And so knowing how I respond to my son, Sage, versus my daughter, Mila, is different. If I respond to Sage in the way that I respond to Mila, it dysregulates him and it
Mm.
regulates her, and vice versa. That he's like, be close to me, but don't touch me. Stop talking to me. I need time to feel and with your proximity, but without the touch. And Mila's like, oh my gosh, validate everything. Tell me all the things. And can I climb back inside the womb? Right? Like there's not enough touch for her.
Yeah.
And knowing your unique child is a huge part of, what do I actually do? How do I jump into the pool? And I don't think that we have done enough teaching around that. It's been too one size fits all and too focused on just the adult narrative without actionable strategies for the response to the child.
I'm like so fired up right now. I'm like, yes, for multiple reasons. And then this is where I'm like, I would love to be on a panel with you to be like, I have a different perspective. I
Go,
have
let's
like,
dance.
I love it because
Yeah.
this is how we make an impact in the
Yeah.
world. So, so much theory, so much
Hmm.
self awareness out there. And people are like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, we've swung so far
Hmm.
that I'm like, parenting is so egotistical and selfish, regardless. Like, we're living vicariously
Correct.
through our children. It's all about us. And then we've kind of swung so far where over parenting, over nurturing, especially if you come from privilege or extreme privilege, where it's like, are you, how much money are you investing in your children's sports? Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And
Sure.
extracurriculars, and why are they wearing better clothes than you and going to Starbucks? Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. So there's that, which is a very privileged way to parent.
Hmm.
And they're losing basic skills. And that's a whole other probably conversation that we can have. But this self awareness is like, you're losing your own critical thinking and, like you said, intuition to tap in. Like, we're disconnecting from our bodies
Correct.
constantly and seeking the external validation. So I'm like, okay, we have the theory, we have the self-awareness, but stop being selfish in the
Mm.
sense that, like, your child is literally struggling. They're screaming at you through their behavior. They're like, help me, help me, help me. And we're still, from through the parenting lens, making it about ourselves. I
Mm.
need to regulate. I need to calm down. I need to stare them in the eyes and say, what do you need from me? While they're in their red zone and they're losing their shit. That is not when you solve problems. So I'm like, can we please bypass this and move on to the next phase, which is like, my child is drowning in their own human experience. And is it biological or physiological where, like, some quote unquote intervention, I don't mean like hardcore intervention, needs to be done on a physical level
Mhm.
versus just talking to them in a different way or creating a safe space where they get to remove themselves. So that's where I'm
Interesting.
like, yeah, because I see that all the time where they're like, well, I'm going to go back and do the worksheets on myself and
Sure.
integrate. And I'm like, do that very quickly, because your child is over there going,
On fire. Yeah.
I need guidance, like life guidance.
I do agree that it is parenting so selfish. And I think about this in one of the questions that's come up so much on book tour for big kids is around the like peer conflict and my kids being left out of this group or whatever. And now when do I step in and how? And if I'm calling Sarah's mom, what am I saying? You know, like, and I think in this pendulum swing, in all of the theory and the self awareness, there's become this idea that we can do this in a way in which our kids always feel included and like they belong and supported. And I'm like, my friend,
Yeah.
that is not the goal. The goal is not that our kids are walking through the world and everywhere they go, they're like, yeah, I don't feel embarrassed ever. I don't ever feel left out. I always know that I belong here. That is not the goal. And that is a hard thing to come to terms with as a parent because we know how shitty it feels to feel left out, to feel embarrassed, to not be included. And we will fight like hell to avoid that for our kids because really we want to avoid that for ourselves.
Repeat that for the people in the back.
We will fight like hell to avoid that for our kids because really we want to avoid that for ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think part of the
Which is selfish.
it's selfish. And I do it too. Like when Sage was 2, we were on the way to a new childcare program. He'd been there for like a week and he's in the back seat and he didn't want to go. And he was like, Mom, I'm going to be at school. I'm going to be sad and I'm going to be all alone. And in my head, I'm like, we don't need this. Let's drive home. I quit this job, right? Like
Yeah.
everything inside of me wants to avoid that for
Mhm.
him because it sucks to watch your kids experience these hard things. And also, it's not our job to remove those obstacles. In fact, we do them a huge disservice in this world when we remove them. When we look back to our childhood and we felt left out or we felt embarrassed, what a lot of us needed was a space to process that, not for that thing to change.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the trepidation in jumping in the water here is if I jump in, I've got to be able to swim alongside my kid when they are treading water, where they're not drowning, but they're not swimming in the school of fish. They're not included. They're feeling left out. They're feeling embarrassed. They're feeling stupid or dumb or angry. They're having a hard time. And I'm not going to give them a life raft. I'm going to swim alongside them. That's really hard to do. I think that is actually when I think of parenting as selfish and for myself included in this, that's the selfish part is I don't want my kid to experience something hard because it's so hard for me to bear witness to and to watch and to wonder, are they going to be okay?
It's not uh it's not fun.
No.
It is awful and nobody signed up for this.
Yeah.
If you decide to engage in being like feeling it, being in it, you're still trying to control their human experience. You're actually secretly taking away from the lessons and they
Yeah.
need to learn to become resilient humans. My oldest is 20 and moved across country, um, which was such a positive thing for him. And he's doing all the things, he's learning about money. And I'm just like, this is great. The teen years were not amazing, but I did the thing and I was holding it and I'm listening to everything that you're saying and I'm like, yes, I did all of that and I was constantly I had to do so much work on myself to
Hmm.
not project and I
Totally.
to hold it, hold it, hold it. And there were some very unconventional things that I had to personally choose to do to advocate for my child in the medical system, in the
Hmm.
educational system. Some really uncomfortable conversations I had to have in our marriage. And I remember feeling the judgment from like society, like the invisible judgment, but also just like those passive aggressive comments that people would make. And my son said to me, oh gosh, this is going to make me cry. Thank you. Thank you for showing up and being the person, the adults that I needed, not the one that uh, would have made you look good. And I just thought, damn, I felt like I was on fire on a daily basis.
Hmm.
And that was not fun. And I know that part of the ability to do that was because of just being in it all the time. And so many people are like, how do I do this? What's the result? What's the step? What's the formula? And I'm like, oh, you're not going to like my answer. And this is not fun. And then that mystical lie, and I'm curious, big kids, bigger feelings. There's this like secret invisible story that we tell ourselves culturally that when they get bigger, it gets easier. And I'm like,
Mm-mm.
OMG, that is a lie.
It's such a lie. And this is why we wrote Big Kids, because I feel like in middle childhood we're really sold that lie. Where we're like, oh, the early years are gonna be so physical and so hard, etc. It's a growing of a human and a feeding of a human and the nap schedules and all the snacks on snacks on snacks. And then the teenage years are so hard emotionally and all that jazz. And I feel like we're sold this lie that there's this middle ground where it's chill for a minute. And it's not. There's
Yeah.
so much development that's happening. And what we really start to see in middle childhood in that like 5 to 12-year-old range is this real pull into identity of who am I outside the home, that
Yeah.
up until then they've largely existed in a family unit at home, and now they're going to be out in the world. And there's really great research from Brene Brown to support the why behind this, but essentially around 7 years old is when kids start to look outside of themselves identity wise, that under the age of 7 they're really relying on adults to keep them alive. And not that if you drop a 7-year-old in the wild they're going to thrive, but it's not like dropping a 2-year-old in the wild. And so a
Right.
7-year-old is starting to say like, oh, who do I want to hang out with? What am I interested in? Where do I want to participate in different clubs or activities? What clothes do I want to wear? How do people feel about me in this world?
Mhm.
And that opens up a whole new can of worms that we haven't in parenting gone through until that happens. I have the privilege of raising two humans, one who's neurotypical and one who's autistic. And the way in which I have to show up as their parent is different from each other. That one needs me to advocate for their sensory needs to be supported so that they can access learning and growth and development. One needs me to really step back and be way more of a listening ear in their world. That it's not actually, the world's already built for my neurotypical human, and it's my job to be an emotional support space for that
Mhm.
kiddo. The other kiddo actually navigates the emotions with way more ease, uh, and has a harder time navigating the physical world and the physical space. And so when it comes to parenting, this is part of the not one size fits all component. It requires us to take a step back and say, what is my role here? When my kid comes home and they're venting because their besties got together and are doing these TikTok dances and they weren't included and they feel left out and they can't believe that they did that. Is it my job to step in, or is it my job to be a listening ear?
Mm.
And being able to decipher that is so tricky because our own stuff is always going to come up in that moment.
I love this conversation. I could talk to you forever and ever and ever. And I want to be respectful of time, but obviously, if people are on the edge and they're like, how do I get more? Talk about
Mhm.
your new book, Big Kids, Bigger Feelings, and all
Yeah.
the things you got coming up and where people can get more of you.
Sweet. Thank you so much. And thanks for dancing with me. Like, yeah, I do a million podcast interviews and I want people to say yes or no, I don't agree. And for us to be able to have real conversations, because that's what I get to do in person when I'm speaking and at events, where I get to have people ask questions and they say, this part makes sense, but this part doesn't. Or what does this look like in real life? And I love that nuance and the going deeper. And it's one of my favorite parts of doing podcasts is the ability to do that. So thank you for doing that today. I have Big Kids, Bigger Feelings is the 5 to 12-year-old range. If you have tiny humans, big emotions would be for you. And I read the audiobook for both. They published with HarperCollins. So wherever books are sold, you can snag them. And head on over to seedandsew.org that's like our mothership where you can find out how to bring this work to your kids' school or what resources we have available for families, teachers, etc. And I also have a podcast, Voices of Your Village, that publishes every Thursday if people want to tune into that bad boy.
Alyssa, thank you for being you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for not giving up. Thanks for continuously jumping in, doing the emotionally uncomfortable work and just being a lighthouse for so many parents and caregivers and educators and humans who are just trying to figure out how to feel good in a world that gets louder and louder. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.